Welcome to this week's episode of Dairy TV, and we hope that you have been following all the lessons that we have been putting for you on this channel. Remember to subscribe. Today we are discussing the matter of silage. If you remember, in an earlier episode, we talked about key success factors in the management of silage at the farm level. So we were able to separate at the farm level from the soil, seed, weeding, fertilization, the total husbandry, all the way to harvesting. And then we stopped at harvesting. Then we said that we are now coming to discuss the post-harvest stages of management in the management of silage. In this case, we are talking about maize silage. So we have harvested the silage. We are now comfortable that it is the land has given us a good product, and we said that one is better managed at the level of husbandry. How to determine how much you harvest and how much value the land gives you has to be managed at the farm level. There is nothing you can do when the crop is already mature if you didn't do a good job at the husbandry. So now we are hoping that you have got an optimal crop. You got perhaps the best yield you could get and the best quality you could get. Now we ask ourselves, once we have harvested, what do we do? First of all, it is very good to plan so that you can be able to see all the costs on paper before you engage, so that you can negotiate where you need to. The reason is, you might actually do very good costing up to harvesting, then you discover that the subsequent stages, the chopping, the ensiling of the silage, all that process, you discover that it's taking too much money, that at the end of the day, the silage that goes to the trough for cow feeding has become too expensive. So always remember to be able to master the escalation of costs so that you can be able to add them together, so that the cost is acceptable for your farm, for your feeding system, and you're not making it too expensive in part of these processes. Now, the other point is that you also ensure that the crop that has come for chopping has a good sugar and energy balance. How do we do that? We mentioned in the earlier episode that when this crop is growing, it develops the cob, but also has a lot of sugar on the stem and has a bit of sugar on the grain. Here we are talking about the balance between sugar and starch on the maize, on the full crop. So how much sugar, how much starch? Remember that if we harvest too early, we have more sugar in that crop than starch because the grains are not fully developed. In some of the countries where the maize varieties do not build starch in the early stages, then sometimes it's even better to let it mature a bit so that you have less sugar and you have more starch. The reason is, when you bring that maize to the bunker and the fermentation stage begins, a lot of sugar is going to be used up in the fermentation process, and that will reduce the amount of sugar that will be found in the final sample of silage. So how to manage that is to ensure that we just have enough sugar for the fermentation, and therefore a lot of other value for that silage goes into starch, because that is really what you're looking for, because silage is primarily an energy fodder. So that one again can only be managed during the time of the growing. It can't be managed at the bunker. But now we are past that. We hope we've got a good mix of sugar and starch, and that we have a good high valuable silage, or maize silage. And now we go to this chopping. Chopping is the practice of putting now that crop into small pieces so that it's ready for ensiling. Here, farmers sometimes make a mistake because either they didn't sharpen their tools very well, so we end up with tearing or shredding instead of chopping. We want to see a chop that is between 0.8 centimeters to about 1 centimeter. That chop goes beyond just what people think perhaps we are chopping so that the cow can be able to get them into her mouth. No, it's beyond that. This chopping also helps you in the whole compaction process. When the pieces are smaller, it first of all makes it very easy to compact the silage and to ensure that no air remains. You can see this silage has very short chops, and that is very, very good, very important. So compaction becomes easier, and then when feeding, because you're going to mix it with other feed, some that are very small, like dairy meal, then other grasses that are also small, then the feed becomes very well mixed. And cows are not able to do what we call selective feeding. They're able to take a full bite without having to choose what to eat and what not to eat. So chopping is very important. Sharpen the knives of your choppers, calibrate, and ensure that when you see the chops coming out, you can be able to adjust to ensure that you get a good chop. Then the other part is about the crushing of the grains. When I look at this silage, I am aware that this silage had grains. I can see cobs. I can see evidence. I can see the skins of kernels, meaning there was grains in this silage and they were well developed in the right stage, and then they got a very good chopper that was able to crush the grains so that the starch or the flesh that is found inside the grain has already been mixed up in the silage, and therefore it will very easily and successfully get into the feeding, get into the ration, because it is separated from the grain. That is very important. If your machine that you're using for chopping does not crush the grain, then there's a huge loss. Some contractors are actually not paid when the farmer realizes that their equipment did not crush the grains completely. So they have to be destroyed, and the feed inside the grain must come out so that the cow can utilize it.
My name is Njeri Gadesha from the Naiposha Dairy Farm located in Naivasha in Nakuru County. We are a dairy farm with about 150 cows. We produce about 1,200 liters per day. As a farm, the way we guarantee that the milk that we produce is of high quality is that we feed our cows right with the right nutrition. We also take care of hygiene issues in terms of where the cows sleep, and also the handling of milk. We make sure that we minimize handling of milk. This ensures that the milk that goes out to our consumers is of high quality and is safe for human consumption.
Now we are done with the chop sizes and the crushing of the grain, which are very important steps. Now we are talking about the bunker sizing. How much bunker do we need? Where I'm standing, I see a very wide bunker. Now the question is, what informed this farmer to make a bunker this size? We can call it a bunker, although this is just a service silage, a dome-shaped, but there are people who decide to do a fully walled bunker. It is always important to know how many cows you are feeding. That then informs you on the dimension of the bunker. What we want to see is a bunker size in such a way that you feed only about 1 meter to 2 meters per week and not longer than that. If you are feeding too much, then maybe it was too narrow, and you are feeding too little, then it means it was too wide. So the cows determine the size of the bunker so that we avoid the heating. We are competing every time we expose the bunker. When we have finished making the silage and we have opened it now for consumption, what we begin to see is that the silage is now exposed to heating. Now the question is, between heating and feeding, which one should move faster? The answer is, we should feed faster than heating. How do we ensure that? The only way to be able to feed faster than the heating process is by making bunkers narrow and in accordance to the number of cows you are feeding. So wide bunkers will always be susceptible to heating. And heating means that our silage is getting spoiled. Our money is getting burnt through decomposition and rotting of silage. So very important that you do bunker sizing. Now the other part is about compaction. Very important. What equipment are you using to compact your silage? We have said that the chops are good. Having good chops is a good step towards good compaction. Then how heavy is the equipment when you begin to run over the material, silage material, to ensure that no air is trapped in? So compaction should always be good. I can see for this particular one, I cannot be able to get my hand inside. It is so compacted, and therefore I don't expect any decomposition or spoilage going on. In fact, this silage feels cold when I put my hand in. It should be cold. If there's any heating, then you know that bacteria is at work and silage is spoiling. So the issue of compaction is very important. One point to note, for the people who do the dome shape or even the walled bunker, always ensure that at the edges we are also pressing very well so that we receive as good compaction on this side just as the edges. The whole compaction should be the same, or should be the same intensity across the bunker. And then finally, about the issue of compaction, one challenge that we run into is the matter of how do we then cover the silage when we are done? How do we ensure, since we have compacted very well at the point of making the silage, how do we ensure that that compaction remains across the life of the bunker? Remember, this is feed preservation. So this bunker can be here for 2-3 years. This farmer could have been storing it for just in case there will be a drought in the future. So it can be here for years. How do we ensure that this intensity that was achieved at the point of making silage is also maintained through the life of the bunker? It's very important to place some heavy material on the bunker at the top so that then you cover. Now, once you do that, then you ensure that even the silage at the top is not heating, because it is just as pressed as the silage at the bottom. The one at the top and the one at the bottom are all well compacted. And therefore, if you take a sample here and take it to the lab, and another sample is taken here to the lab, these samples should be able to give us a similar nutritional profile. One from the top, one from the bottom. The variations should be very minimal. But if we realize that this one has a lot less energy, then it means that spoilage was happening at the top and was not happening at the bottom. It means that part of that silage actually is spoiling on the edges and on the top. Then finally, it's about utilization. Now, remember, the shortest time you take to make silage, the better. If you take too long, you're also exposing to spoilage, because fermentation begins and then you are still making your silage, you are adding fresh material, and that becomes a problem. Because if you take too long, say a week, and you are compacting, you cannot stop the fermentation process from beginning, but you're still adding fresh material. So the silage is not fermenting uniformly, because some of it is already there, the other one is still coming in. That's a problem, and you don't get good quality silage. So ensure as much as possible, if you're using a contractor, agree that you're closing the bunker in 1 day. If it is not possible, maybe 2 days, but clearly not a week, not 2 weeks. Let's make the silage making duration very short. And then we now talk about utilization. How do we utilize? And this will be the last step in terms of utilizing. Can we have a style of utilizing the silage from the bunker in a way that we have the least wastage possible? In this particular one, I see a problem. The silage has been cut a bit irregular. Instead of being sliced in a very straight way, I see some farmers investing in very sharp knives where they're able to slice off the bunker on a very straight line when there is good compaction, so that they only slice what they need for that day. And there is no silage falling off from the cliff of the bunker and coming to the ground. This is the reason why it is important to ensure that silage does not fall off. If I put my hand in here, it's cold, because the silage is still in the compaction stage. It is still well compacted. It is not disembarking from the compaction. But now here, silage is on the ground. So what I see here, if I put my hand in here, then silage is heating. So if these people take too long to collect this silage, maybe we are going to lose about 50 kgs of silage for that day, because we already removed it from here. So whichever one falls at the bottom of the bunker must be taken into the feeding very quickly, so that we avoid spoilage. Once we have done that, then we are likely to have done a very successful process for silage making, and we get full value. The issue of proper utilization of silage and how to cut it off from the bunker, and how to manage wastage so that we ensure that over 90%, 95% of all the silage preserved gets into the trough and eventually to the stomach of the cow, is the last point in this episode. We hope that you have found this very helpful, and that you can make value from maize silage by doing the right things. This brings us to the end of this episode. We can look forward to other episodes on silage making.